was G. Stanley Hall? How did he contribute to psychology? If William James is known as the father of American psychology, G. Stanley Hall is considered the son of American psychology. Hall was one of the most influential figures in early American psychology, playing a crucial role in promoting and expanding the field during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Born in Massachusetts, Hall was raised by loving and supportive parents. They nurtured his passion for learning and encouraged his intellectual curiosity. This foundation would set him on a path to become a pioneering force in psychology, shaping the discipline through both his research and institutional leadership. In 1878, he made history by earning America's first PhD in psychology from Harvard University. His dissertation was supervised by none other than William James, one of the most influential figures in early American psychology. Under James' mentorship, Hall's work set the stage for psychology as an independent field of study in the United States. This milestone was a turning point for psychology in higher education, paving the way for future graduate programs and research in psychological science. Hall's journey into psychology began when he read Wilhelm Wundt's Principles of Psychology. Inspired by this work, he traveled to Germany in 1879 to further explore physiological psychology under Wundt himself. However, Hall was not impressed. He found Wundt's experimental methods and laboratory work unconvincing. Instead of focusing on reaction times and perception, Hall became fascinated with human development and evolutionary psychology. It's clear that Charles Darwin had a profound influence on Hall's thinking. He was particularly interested in how evolutionary theory could be applied to psychology. Upon returning to the U.S., Hall went on to teach at Johns Hopkins University and later became the first president of Clark University. Both universities were major centers for psychological research in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they remain important institutions for psychology today. G. Stanley Hall was a pioneer in American psychology, making several groundbreaking contributions that shaped the field. One of his most significant achievements was establishing the first experimental psychology laboratory in the United States. By this time, Wilhelm Wundt had already set up his lab in Germany, and William James had created a lab at Harvard. But there was a key difference. Unlike James, Hall actively conducted experiments. His research covered a wide range of topics, many of which fell under the umbrella of genetic psychology. This field focuses on the origins and development of consciousness and behavior, reflecting the strong influence of Darwin's work on Hall's ideas. His studies examined how psychological traits develop over time and how evolution shapes human behavior. Hall's second major contribution came in 1887 when he founded the American Journal of Psychology, the first academic psychology journal in the United States. Why was this so important? Before journals like this, psychological research had little formal organization, and findings were not widely shared. Academic journals provided a structured way for researchers to publish their studies, exchange ideas, and build on each other's work. The establishment of such journals was a crucial step in advancing psychology as a scientific discipline. This is a historical photograph of Hall's laboratory at Johns Hopkins University. The image showcases an early psychological research environment, complete with various scientific instruments, microscopes, and testing equipment used for physiological and psychological studies. The room is filled with wooden cabinets storing chemical bottles, research materials, and brass instruments for experimental psychology. Several laboratory tables are arranged with equipment, reflecting Hall's commitment to empirical research. This space likely facilitated studies on child development, education, and adolescence, topics that Hall heavily influenced. It was in laboratories like this that psychology transitioned from a philosophical discipline to an empirical science in the United States. After making major contributions to psychology, G. Stanley Hall continued his work at Clark University, where he became its first president in 1889. His leadership helped shape the institution into a hub for psychological research and scientific inquiry. At Clark, Hall emphasized the use of science and evidence-based approaches across all academic disciplines, aligning with the broader movement in universities toward empirical research and experimentation. One of Hall's key initiatives at Clark was the establishment of another experimental psychology laboratory, this time with superior equipment and financial resources. This lab became one of the best equipped in the country and provided new opportunities for groundbreaking research. The studies conducted at Clark covered a wide range of topics, focusing on developmental psychology, studying how children and adolescents grow and learn, abnormal psychology, investigating psychological disorders and atypical behaviors, and comparative psychology, comparing behaviors across different species. Under the leadership of Edmund Sanford, the lab at Clark produced significant research in the 1890s, including the first maze learning studies, which became foundational in behavioral psychology. By the early 20th century, Clark University's graduate school had become one of the most popular and influential psychology programs in the world. It attracted students from diverse backgrounds and different countries, cementing its reputation as a leading center for psychological research and education. Now let's talk about a major milestone in psychology, one that should sound familiar. In 1892, G. Stanley Hall founded the first professional organization for psychology in the United States, the American Psychological Association, the APA. Not only did he establish the APA, but he also served as its first president. His leadership shaped the organization's goals and direction for decades to come. Hall's work in establishing the APA was crucial in uniting psychologists under a professional network, encouraging collaboration and helping psychology gain credibility as a scientific discipline. One of Hall's most significant contributions was in the field of developmental psychology. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, Hall was a pioneer in studying human development across the lifespan. For example, he was the first psychologist to identify adolescence as a distinct stage of development, what he famously described as a time of storm and stress. This idea shaped modern developmental psychology and influenced how we understand teenage behavior today. He detailed these findings in his book, Adolescence, Its Psychology and Its Relations to Physiology, Anthropology, Sociology, Sex, Crime, and Religion, which was published in 1931. Hall didn't just focus on youth, he also explored the psychological changes associated with adulthood and aging. As he personally experienced these stages, he documented his observations and expanded the study of human development beyond adolescence. Through his work, Hall helped establish the foundation of developmental psychology, shaping how we view the psychological growth of individuals across their entire lives. One of Hall's most well-known and controversial ideas was his application of recapitulation theory to human development. Recapitulation theory is the idea that the development of an individual mirrors the evolutionary history of the species. In other words, Hall believed that as a child grows, they pass through stages that resemble the evolutionary past of humans. Hall argued that infants, children, and adolescents go through psychological and behavioral phases that reflect the stages of human evolution. Infancy is similar to early primitive humans. Babies are impulsive and instinct-driven. Childhood resembles early human societies. Toddlers are playful, curious, and exploratory. Adolescence is a critical period of transformation, mirroring the transition from primitive societies to modern civilization. Hall was deeply influenced by Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer. He saw human development as an extension of evolutionary progress, with each stage contributing to a more refined, intelligent, and socially advanced adult. He argued that adolescence was a crucial stage where individuals transitioned from savage, animalistic tendencies to rational, civilized thought. While Hall's theory was influential in early developmental psychology, it has since been debunked. Modern research shows that child development is shaped by a mix of genetic, environmental, and social influences, rather than simply replaying human evolution. Hall's legacy is also marked by controversial views on eugenics, a movement that sought to control human reproduction to promote what were seen as desirable traits while discouraging or preventing the reproduction of those deemed unfit. He was heavily influenced by Darwin's theory of evolution and Herbert Spencer's social Darwinism, the idea that human societies, like biological organisms, evolved over time, with the fittest individuals rising to the top. He saw human development as a reflection of evolutionary progress, and this extended to his belief that certain populations were biologically superior. He advocated for policies that promoted the reproduction of individuals he considered more intellectually and morally fit, while discouraging reproduction among those he deemed less fit. Hall also expressed views on racial hierarchies, arguing that different ethnic groups were at different stages of evolutionary development, a perspective that was used to justify discrimination. He believed education should be designed to nurture those with superior traits while limiting opportunities for those considered inferior. His views were particularly concerning regarding immigration, race, and intelligence, aligning with the broader eugenics movement that sought to restrict access to education and employment for marginalized groups. The eugenics movement was later used to justify forced sterilization laws in the U.S. and influenced Nazi ideology in Germany. Today, psychology rejects eugenics-based theories, recognizing that intelligence, behavior, and ability are shaped by a complex mix of genetic, environmental, and social factors, not racial or biological determinism. Hall was undeniably a key figure in American psychology, but his endorsement of eugenics serves as a reminder of the dangers of misapplying scientific theories to justify inequality. His contributions to developmental psychology remain influential, but his advocacy for social policies based on flawed science is now widely condemned. In 1909, Hall organized a groundbreaking conference at Clark University, where he extended an invitation to none other than Sigmund Freud to lecture about his work. Hall's decision to invite Freud was no coincidence. The two shared overlapping interests: human development, sexuality, and abnormal psychology, which made Hall an ideal supporter of Freud's emerging field of psychoanalysis. This event marked Freud's first and only trip to the United States. At the time, Freud's ideas were still gaining traction, and he saw this invitation as a pivotal moment, a sign that his theories were beginning to receive international recognition. Hall's invitation played a crucial role in introducing Freud's work to American psychologists, setting the stage for the growing influence of psychoanalytic thought in the 20th century. This now iconic photograph captures a historic moment at the conference at Clark University. At the center of the image stands Hall himself, a pioneering figure in American psychology. To his right, we see Sigmund Freud, who traveled from Austria for what would be his first and only trip to the United States. Freud saw this invitation as a major milestone, signaling that his work was gaining international recognition. To the left, holding a hat, is William James, often referred to as the father of American psychology. Surrounding them are other notable figures, including James Cattell, Edward Titchener, Carl Jung, and Henry Goddard, all of whom made significant contributions to the field. What can this photo tell us about the development of psychology? This image is more than just a gathering of great minds. It offers insight into the growth and structure of psychology at the time. The presence of Freud, Jung, and other European psychologists shows how psychological ideas traveled across continents. It highlights the exchange of theories and methods that shaped modern psychology. Notice anything missing in this photo? There are no women. Many of these men were part of a group called the Experimentalists, founded by Edward Titchener. This group explicitly excluded women from their meetings. However, to his credit, Titchener did mentor and support several women in psychology, but only outside of these gatherings. This conference was a landmark event in psychology, demonstrating both its rapid development and its early limitations. The discussions that took place here shaped the trajectory of psychological research for decades to come.